Hello Year 8s and welcome back to mathematics. In today's lesson we're continuing our topic of measurement and we're going to be looking at the circumference of circles. Now last lesson we talked about the perimeter of different 2D shapes, and what we said was the perimeter of a shape was the total length around the outside of a shape. What we're doing today is looking at the perimeter of circles in particular, and there's a specific name for it, circumference. So today's lesson, to review the perimeter of circles, and by the end of today's lesson, we want to be able to recall the formula for the circumference of a circle, apply the formula for the circumference, and find perimeters of shapes involving circles. Okay, so a quick definition. The circumference is the total. So the circumference is the total length around the outside of a circle, and that is the perimeter of a circle. So when we're thinking of a circumference, that is just the total length around the outside of a circle. So for example, I've got a circle here. The circumference is just the total length to get from over here, for example. I'm just going to draw around my circle all the way here, and we want to find out what that length is. So that is my circumference. And sometimes we use the big letter C to represent our circumference. Now, in order for us to actually calculate the circumference, we need to actually know a few different specific measurements relating to my circle. And here I've actually drawn them out. Now, the first one, probably the one that I usually deal with most often, is this measurement here from here to here. So this is from the center of my circle to the edge of my circle. Now, if you have a measurement from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle, that is called the radius. And what we notice with our circle is that the radius is even all the way around. This radius is always the same for a circle. And so for the same circle, not every circle. You've got different circles of different sizes, of course. And we use the letter r, small r, to represent our radius. And so here, the radius is just the length from the center of the circle. So center is over here. Let me just draw it in a yellow dot. So this is the center of my circle to the edge. Center to the edge is my radius. Now, there's another measurement which I've drawn with the other arrow from edge to edge, which passes through the center. Now this is our diameter. And so we use the letter D to represent our diameter. If you have a measurement that goes from edge to edge of a circle that goes through the center, that is called our diameter. Now, there's a relationship between our radius and our diameter. Notice that the diameter is actually made up of two radiuses. You can actually split up our diameter into one radius here and one radius here. And so the radius is just half of diameter, or diameter is just twice the length of a radius. And so that actually helps and contributes to our formula for our circumference in a moment, so over here. So when we're trying to calculate the circumference of a circle, so C, there's actually two ways that you can do it. There's two ways depending on what measurement you get given. The first one, if you get given the radius, it's actually 2 pi r. Or, actually let me write it in over here, 2 pi r. So if you get given a radius, it's 2 pi r. That is just 2 times pi times r. Now pi is just a special number that you probably have encountered already. It's roughly 3.1415 and so on. But on your calculator, if I get my calculator out, there's a button to get pi. It's if you press shift, and then at the bottom here where you've got times 10 to the power x, you've got that little pi up the top there. So here, that's how you can get pi. And so here, if you want to find the circumference of a circle, we use 2 times pi times r. The other way is if you get given the diameter, it's just the same as pi d, or that just means pi times d. So if we get given the length of the diameter, we just multiply pi with the diameter. Now the reason why I've given you these two formulas, and actually the thing that you're going to notice is that these two formulas are exactly the same thing. If you notice the first one, we've got 2r, both of them have pi, but what's different is that in the first one we've got 2r, and in my second one I've got d. Now if you think about it, 2r, if I've got two radiuses, that just becomes one diameter. And so here, these two formulas are exactly the same thing, but just depending on what type of measurement you get given in your question or in your circle. So when we're trying to find the circumference of a circle, we use this formula. C is equal to 2 pi r or pi d, depending on what measurements you get given. Okay, So when we're trying to find the circumference of a circle, these are the steps that we want to do. Firstly, identify whether you have a diameter or radius of your circle. So have a look at your circle. Do you have a measurement from the center of the circle to the edge? That's a radius. Or do you have a measurement from the edge of the circle to the other edge that goes through the center? If it's the radius, that means that you're going to need to substitute it into 2 pi r. If it's diameter, you're going to need to substitute it into pi d. And so here, identify whether you have the diameter or radius of a circle, and then substitute this value into the relevant formula for the circumference. So find out whether you have a radius or diameter, then pick the correct formula and substitute those values in. Okay, so let's have a go at a couple of examples of this. Example 1, finding the circumference of a circle using a calculator. So of circle using a calculator. So I'm going to show you how to actually use your calculator to calculate the circumference using that pi button. Okay, so use the circumference of these circles. Find the circumference of these circles correct to 2 decimal places. We want the answer correct to 2 decimal places. Use a calculator for the value of pi. So let's have a look at the first example. A. We've got this measurement here of 3.5 meters. Now, if you have a look at my diagram, is that going from edge to edge of the circle passing through the center? Or is that going from the center to the edge? Well, if you have a look, this just goes from my center all the way to the edge of my circle. And so this is a radius. So I'm going to write here, radius is equal to 3.5 meters. And so because I've got the radius, I'm going to use that first formula, 2 pi r. So when I'm doing this, I'm just going to write out that formula. I've got c is equal to 2 pi r. And then I'm just going to substitute my value in. So here this becomes 2. Let me try this again. 2 times pi times, the radius was 3.5 meters. And so here, I'm going to put this in my calculator. 2 times, when you want to get pi, shift times 10 to the power x times 3.5. So here we get 21.991. And we want to round that to 2 decimal places. So we go to, just going to press that. There we go. We want 2 decimal places, so we're going to go to the second decimal place. That second 9, we look at the next one. 1 we round down, so we just leave it. So here we go, 21.99 meters. Okay, there we go. That's how we can calculate the radius of circumference of our circle. So here we got given the radius, so we had to use 2 pi r. Let's have a look at the next example. Here we've got another circle, and this time we've got a measurement of 4 centimeters. Okay, now have a look again. Is this measurement going from edge to edge of my circle, or is it going from the center to the edge? And if you have a look, it's going from edge of my circle to edge of my circle, and it passes through the center. So this is a diameter. So I'm going to write here, d is equal to 4 centimeters. And so because it's a diameter, I'm going to use that second formula, pi d, or pi times d. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go c is equal to pi d. I write my formula down first step. It's pretty helpful to actually do that. And then I'm going to write, okay, pi times 4. And I can chuck this in my calculator. Pi times 4. And I get 12.5663. Now I want to round this to 2 decimal places. So I look at my second decimal place. Let me try that again. Look at my second decimal place. I've got 12.56. So that's my second decimal place. And I look at the next number, 6. That means I need to round up. So I need to add 1 to the previous digit. So I've got 12.57. So final answer here, 12.57. And the measurement was in centimeters. So there we go, centimeters. So that's how we can calculate the circumference of a circle, depending on the question, depending on what measurement gets given to us. So here we need to identify what measurement we get. Do we get given a radius, or do we get given a diameter? And when that happens, we need to use the correct formula. If we're using the radius, we need to use 2 pi r, and if we're using the diameter, we use pi d, and we just substitute whatever value we have into that formula. Okay, so that's these first 2 examples when trying to find the circumference of a circle. Now for the following examples, we want to find the circumference of a circle with approximations of pi. Now mathematicians have come up with different approximations, or just rough estimates of what pi is, using different numbers. And so here, we're going to use 2 of them to help us figure out what calculate the circumference of our circle. So calculate the circumference of these circles using the given approximations of pi. So let's have a look at this first one. Here we've got a measurement of 10 meters, and we want to use pi is equal to 3.14. Now, here we want to first check, is that a radius or diameter? Now, if you have a look here, we're going from edge of my circle to edge of my circle, and we pass through the center. So this is a diameter. So I'm going to write here, D is equal to 10 meters. Okay, and so because I've got that, I'm going to use my formula. C is equal to pi times D. Now, this time, instead of using a calculator, they want us to use this approximation of pi is equal to 3.14. So what I'm going to write is pi is 3.14, and I'm timesing that by the diameter, 10, and that's in meters. Now here, like we did in the last lesson, we were converting units. When you're multiplying by powers of 10, we just count up how many zeros we have, and then we move the decimal one spot to the right. And so here, this just becomes 31.4 meters. And so this one, pretty nice for us because we're multiplying by powers of 10. So here we had to use an approximation of pi, but still we need to identify if we have a radius or diameter first before we use the formula. Okay, let's have a look at the next example. Here we've got a measurement of 14 centimeters, and we've got pi is equal to 22 over 7. Okay, so for this one, what do we have? Do we have a radius or diameter? Well, if you have a look here, we've got a measurement that goes from the center of my circle to the edge. So this is a radius. So I've got radius is equal to 14 centimeters. So this time, instead of using pi d, we're going to use the formula C is equal to 2 pi r. Okay, C is equal to 2 pi r. We're going to substitute our values in now. And here we want to use pi is equal to 22 over 7. So I'm going to write here 2 times 22 over 7 times our radius, which was 14. And so we can start to simplify this. Now, because we've got a fraction we're multiplying, we can cancel out common factors from our fraction, from our denominator and our numbers here. So here, 7 and 14 have a common factor of 7. So here, 7 divided by 7 gives me 1. 14 divided by 7 gives me 2. And now because I've got 1 in my denominator, I can just multiply all my numbers here together. So I've got 2 times 22, 44, times 2 gives me 88 centimeters. So here we go. That's how we can calculate the following examples. Now, you can also use a calculator to help you do these calculations. That's totally fine too. I just did it in my head because I could, and it's a lot easier than using my calculator. Okay, so that's it for today's lesson, Year 8. Let's just do a quick summary of what we looked at in today's lesson. In today's lesson, we talked about the circumference of circles. The circumference is just the total length around the outside of our circle, which is another way of thinking about the perimeter of our circle. And so here we had to actually use we have two different formulas, which basically give us the same thing for our circumference, no, they don't basically, they do give us the same thing. The first one is 2 pi r, and where r is the radius, the length from the center of our circle to the edge. And the other one was pi times d, or the length that you would get if you go from edge to edge of our circle, making sure that that passes through the center. And so depending on what you get given in your question, you're going to use different formulas. So for example, if you get given a radius, you need to use 2 pi r like we do on the left here. And if we're using the diameter, we got to use our 2 pi times d like we do on the right for this example. And we went through a few examples. In particular, we noticed that if we wanted to get pi, we have to press the shift times 10 to the power x button on our calculator. So that's it for today's lesson, Year 8. Hope you guys are staying safe wherever you are, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!